Hello, Lisa Arana here, and thank you for visiting me today for this Assemble This video. Today's card is full of watercolor and distressing techniques, all added together create this beautiful antique sympathy card. I'm using the Heart of Autumn August 2020 sentiment kit from Unity Stamp Company. Just love that big leafy heart and all those gorgeous scripty words. I have that big heart in my Misty, and I'm just putting down a scrap piece of paper. And then I'm going to ink that up just to get an impression, and I'm using the Gina K Amalgam ink in Chocolate Truffle. This impression is not really all that important, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I created a die cut in my Silhouette Cameo machine. I had it out, so I figured I'd just create a heart to use. You could also use any die cut that you have that might fit the shape of this heart. You could also hand cut it out with scissors. Didn't even think about that, but that's pretty easy to do as well. So I'm using the negative and lining that up with that stamped image, and then placing my die cut inside the negative. That way I know my stamped portion is going to fit perfectly within that die cut I created. Sometimes it's hard to see where to stamp with rubber stamps, so that's why I like to use the negative from the cut. Next, I'm going to stamp this big barn wall background stamp onto some Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. Again, I'm just using that Chocolate Truffle ink and inking that stamp up really well. And then I'll close the door and see what we have here. I'm doing a nice solid impression, and I'm rubbing my hand over that big stamp just to make sure I get all the ink I can off of that stamped image. Inking it up one more time and then doing the same thing again. And that just creates the perfect impression. So now we're going to do a bit of watercolor with the Gina K ink. I have all my colors swatched onto an acrylic block, and then I added a spritz of water over each of those little ink swatches. And then I'm picking up the ink using a water brush. I'm starting out with the grass green color from Gina K. I'm also going to be using Fired Brick, Craft, Sweet Corn, and Sweet Mango as well. I just love these fall colors all mixed together. I just grabbed a baby wipe so I could wipe off some of that color in between watercoloring with. You may have noticed that I didn't fill in all of the leaves with green. Some of them I filled in just the bottom portion, and that's so I can mix my colors. I want this to look like the leaves are changing with the season, so I'm not filling them all in with one color, and I'm going to be mixing kind of a variation of all the colors I have on my palette here. What I love about watercolors is it doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm not working hard to stay in the lines, though I am trying to follow them. If the watercolor does bleed out a little bit, it's not the end of the world. It kind of adds to the effect of the watercolor, so it's perfect. That's why I like to work with watercolors, because it is so forgiving. So now I moved on to the yellow, and then now I'm on the orange. And again, I'm just kind of working with adding those in and layering them up and over some of the other colors that I've already laid down. I like the mix of having some of the leaves a solid color and then some of them changing as well. And I'm just making this up as I go along. I didn't have a plan when I started, so as I'm filling these in, I'm moving back and forth between the green, the orange, and the green, the orange, and the yellow, and kind of mixing those in. I am going to add the red in last. It is a big, stark, bold color, so I wanted it to be kind of more subtle than the other one, so I'm doing that one last. And this image does have a few little hidden elements. It has some hearts, some little mushrooms, and pine cones amongst those big fall leaves. I just love how the red is really adding a pop of color and kind of finishing off everything. And again, I'm just kind of tapping here or there, wherever I think I want to add a little bit of red. I'm kind of spacing out the colors in this image. I kind of want there to be a balance of green in each section, a balance of the orange, a balance of the yellow. And so I'm working in almost a triangular pattern, trying to keep everything moving evenly throughout the image. Last, I'm working with the craft color, and I'm going to add a little bit of the craft in and over some of the leaves as well. I'm using this as a shadow to create a bit of dimension to the leaves, as well as, again, going with that feeling of the leaves changing colors in the season. Just creates a bit of depth to each of those leaves. So once the watercoloring of the heart was finished, I'm using up the rest of my palette here, just adding a bunch of water to what I had there, and using a big flat brush to kind of swipe on some color to this barn wall background that I got going on. Right now I'm just using the craft and just doing big strokes from left to right, just kind of creating almost a wood grain kind of effect. Just going back and forth, layering up that ink color. So now that I have a nice base of craft, I'm going to go in with that sweet corn and add a little bit of yellow to the image as well. I'm leaving some of the white behind the background. I like the contrast of the lighter color and the darker colors, so again, that's something I'm doing intentionally. Did not want to fill it all in with the watercolor, so I'm doing that layer by layer and creating a bit of dimension that way. We will be doing more to this, so it won't be so stark white, but that was my process with the watercolor. Now I just laid that under something heavy so it can dry flat, and then I'm going to move on to doing some distressing with the same inks that we used for watercoloring. And I'm just using a blending brush, and I'm using that sweet corn and craft again, and just blending around the edge of the heart and towards the center. We're going to start building up our antique look by mixing these two blending colors. Next, we're going to blend over that barn wall background as well, layering up the craft and the yellow. And I'm starting around the edge and moving towards the center. I will be kind of distressing over the center as well, but I like the idea of having the center lighter than the edges. Just kind of creates a nice framing effect. We're going to add in a little bit of that chocolate truffle. Just want to again add some more dimension. I wasn't getting quite the depth I wanted with just the craft, so we're going to add one more level of color and depth with that chocolate truffle. So I went all around the edge of the barn wall background and filling in again, kind of in the center a little bit. And then we're going to add a little bit of that chocolate truffle to the heart as well, again creating a darker edge around the edge of the heart. I have this paper doily that I want to use, and it was in this bright white, so we're going to antique this up using the yellow and the craft again. And this just took these two colors. I didn't want to add the chocolate truffle to it because I did want the lightness from it. I'm just blending these on in layers, kind of building up how antiqued I want this to look. So I ran my background through a die cut. It's just a stitch scalloped rectangle, and I'm going to glue my paper doily to the front with some liquid adhesive. wrap some string around the front of that and then tie that into a bow. I just love the look of this string against that pretty little doily and the rustic barn wall background. And then since this paper got a little warped from all the water that we used, I am using liquid adhesive to glue it to my card front, which is a piece of craft cardstock, and then I did distress around the edges of that craft cardstock with a bit of that chocolate truffle. And then again, I'm going to place something heavy on top of that while that liquid adhesive dries. And then once that's done, I'm gluing that all to a card base. And I just use tape adhesive for that. Put a little bit of foam adhesive behind that heart. And then I used the Unity cut file to create a die cut for the sentiment, and I stamped the Sympathy sentiment in the center of the die cut, and then stamped the word deepest on a strip of cardstock that I distressed as well, and then just glued those directly down onto that heart. And then last, just for a little bit of interest and shine, I'm using some clear Nuvo drops. This is the Morning Dew, and just placing dots over some of the hearts in the image just for another level of interest. And here is the finished card after all those antiquing techniques. I just love how it changed from a stark white paper to this warm and aged look. That paper doily was just the perfect backdrop for that fall leaf heart, and this bit of string just tied everything all together. I'll have all the supplies linked in the description of this video. If you have any questions or sweet comment, post below. Thank you so much for creating with me today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.